everybody. Welcome back to the Dawn of Drones podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. We've got Jason Crist, our guest from Class G, the CEO there, waving in the background as well. Happy 4th of July, belated to all of our folks dialing in from the United States. We are kicking off a brand new month, the month of July, here on the podcast. So we're dedicating this entire month to the theme of innovation. And Jason and Class G are sponsoring this entire month. And when you hear about what he's doing and his ideas and his company, you're going to understand why innovation is really the perfect theme for Class G. But before we get to innovation and diving deep into what Class G is doing, let's stop for a second and reflect on June. So we had an incredible month involving emerging industry leaders, and that month was sponsored by the Sonoran Desert Institute. So if you missed any of those back episodes, either last month or frankly at any time, go back and watch them on YouTube. So DroneLife has a YouTube channel called DroneLife TV. Go ahead and subscribe to that and you'll get all the notifications when we're coming up next. We had John Miner, the Dean and Managing Director of the School of Unmanned Technology for the Sonoran Desert Institute, kicking off last month. Jordan Sikoria, the CEO of Arium Analytics, a Canadian company with this ornithopter that's the Robird. I mean, when you hear some of this, you think they could fit in Innovation Month too. Asaf Mansa, the CTO of Defense Solutions, that has a cyber-based counter-drone technology. Of course, we were live from the Energy Drone and Robotics Coalition Summit with Sean Gare, the managing director. That was so cool. We also did a live stream with a whole bunch of companies from there. And then last week, I have to say, we broke all kinds of records, not surprisingly maybe, with the amazing Julie Garland, the CEO of Avtrain, that Ireland-based company that just got a $7 million Euro grant from the CESAR-3 research to do UTM in Ireland with a whole bunch of her partners. So, I mean, what an incredible month, and I'm really looking forward to this one. And so without further ado, let's jump into it with Jason. Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Don. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you that don't know Jason, he's super humble. He's, let's just call him an extreme introvert. And so just him being here is a big deal. And we're so glad that you're breaking outside of your comfort zone. By the way, Jason was also a silver sponsor for our Law Tech Connect workshop, our very first one that we held at AUVSI Exponential in Orlando, Florida in April. So he was on an incredible panel all about avigation rights. You heard it right here, folks. Avigation, the concept of aviation, air rights, who owns the airspace, and it was an incredible panel. So we're going to talk about that today. But before we get into that, Jason, why don't you just first tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. So when I was younger, I began my knowledge journey with robotics and mechanical engineering at my early teenage years. Got into a bit of trouble and joined the military to help quell that mischievousness. I did aerospace ground equipment for 4 years, and I was a mechanic that fixed all the equipment for many airframes, volunteered for OIF and OEF, and I've been in 28 countries and hope to add to that list soon.
Wow. So thank you for your service. And for those who don't know, Jason was talking about Operation Enduring Freedom, and that's OEF, and Operation Iraqi Freedom. So served overseas, and man, did you just say 28 countries?
I did.
Holy shnikes. But you're based in Kentucky. Is that right?
I am now, yes.
And, you know, your origin story for Class G is really interesting. Can you share why did you create Class G? What spurred it?
So we created Class G back in 2017, but the idea came about in 2016. A neighbor of mine was flying his drone over my property, and we I didn't really like that, but my extrovert wife talked me down from shooting it down, and so we had a discussion that I wouldn't mind if he flew over my property if he was to pay me a small toll for the usage of it, and so that's how the initial idea came about.
Wow. Okay, so let's break that down for a second. First of all, your extrovert wife, Anastasia, she's very much a part of your company, is that right?
That's 100% correct.
Yes, and I had the privilege of meeting her at AUVSI as well. And smart woman, because, for everybody out there, if you don't know this, and by the way, there are people that don't know this. And I just saw on one of these Facebook forums an article written by a guy that talked about the 5 or 6 ways to basically take down a drone that's bothering you. And like, other than calling the police, every single one of those ways was illegal. And so really ridiculous, use a laser and things like this. So anyway, bottom line is your wife is very smart, and I'm glad she talked you off the fence there, because it is illegal to shoot down a drone or laser a drone or any of these things under federal law. It's the Aircraft Sabotage Act. And, it sounds to me like, Jason, as you were talking, after this incident occurred literally over your backyard, that's probably, was that more of a rare event, or was this neighbor kind of continuously flying over your yard?
It was an isolated event. He doesn't really fly very often, but it just happened to work out that way and then get the hamster running. And, we did some research and found out there wasn't anything. So we started that arduous pursuit.
Well, and we're gonna get to that pursuit in a second, but I'll tell you something, Jason. I was just, we talked about the 4th of July in the beginning of this episode, and I'm sitting on my deck, and there was an FPV drone buzzing, first person view, buzzing all over my neighborhood across my backyard, on the 4th of July as I'm sitting on my deck. And, I think, as drone regulations button up, and beyond visual line of sight, and these deliveries are enabled, the question is, how many drones and where are they going to be? And you raise a great point that clearly, right, it bothered you, and that's called in the law the use and enjoyment of your property, and it's part of trespass law. So the hamster wheels were spinning in your brains. So what did you do, and basically what is Class G now all of that about?
So Class G is an air traffic tolling and flight data management company. Essentially, it's an easy pass for the future drone highways. We're going to incorporate the people instead of just the highways, so to speak.
Okay, so let's kind of break it down a little bit. This is, first of all, who are you? We talked about your wife, but who else are you working with on this, on your company and on this project? Did you hire a software or app developer to kind of create this system?
So it's a couple part system, but yes, we did. We hired Oracle to complete our APIs for the software portion of the system, and we're pretty pleased with how that turned out thus far.
Okay, so Oracle, that's no joke. They're leaders in software and APIs. And so how would this system work? And sometimes a picture paints a.
So a picture's worth 1,000 words is what Dawn was about to say, and that's why we're going to give you a walkthrough of the Class G application here. As you can kind of see, it gives you a 360-degree view of all the drone flights that are happening over your property. This goes and drills down into owner-operator data and even specific flights that have happened, what models were flying, the tolling data, so how much you would collect and who collects what, as well as any violations that have happened during the course of that flight path or operation. And I mean, this could be important data for you to understand to know whether or not that your property has been flown over safely or is being flown over safely or consistently. There's also a list of regulators in the next tab here that we're going to go to. That'll give you an idea of people that you could possibly contact in your local area. Reports tab kind of speaks for itself. This is where you get to understand if you're in a highly trafficked area, whether or not you're actually going to be collecting data. And here is the detailed search if you already had flight data and just wanted to check things out. Now this is the super cool feature here. You can actually check out individual drone flights on the map. You can see which properties they trafficked over during the course of their operation, and gives you everything down to exact latitude, longitude, operator, all that fun information that was in the tabs is now here and accessible in the map view also.
Missed our Clubhouse discussion last Thursday. We'll drop that link in the chat. You can listen to that on replay, but we got pretty deep into the legal issues, and I don't know that we're going to necessarily dig super deep into those now, but really, when you think about what you're doing, Jason, there's significant legal and regulatory issues that need to be resolved for this to work, right? So let me ask you this first of all. So you showed us the dashboard, you showed us how it works, but as a practical matter, I'm a homeowner. Is this a software as a service? Is this something I need to do on my laptop or or can I use my cell phone to tap into this Class G system?
So it's going to be a bit, yeah. In the future, it's a bit of both. So the terrestrial module that tracks everything aerial-wise above your home is logged automatically and stored in a database, and we're pursuing the supplemental service data provider. I think I got that backwards, but that's okay. And then
no, I think you're right.
And then we're going to use the app once we get that completed, so it can complement the system that runs on its own. And so that way, if you wanted to pull up the API, you can see what has been tracked, what has been logged, and then everything will be automated as far as that goes. But the app is one of the things we're excited about, because it's a point and click use of your camera that does the same thing as the terrestrial module. So if you lose power, or for some reason your terrestrial module on your roof doesn't work, you still have the ability to take your phone out, because its GNSS location is tracked, and you have your coordinates for your specific 3D geo area that you own property-wise, and you can still validate that if someone flies over, you can take a picture and on your phone, and it'll roll it into the same database.
So it just without the phone application, is there other equipment I would need to install, like in my roof or around my backyard or my house?
So there's a rooftop module. It's called a terrestrial module, and that will be rooftop based. And then we have UAS modules that will be on the drones, or the capability to read other drone modules through remote ID or what have you.
Okay, so you raised a big issue right there, remote ID. So for those out there that aren't aware, in January of 2021, last year, the FAA released the final remote ID rule, and a couple of different components to that. One is standard remote ID, the other is a broadcast module remote ID. But for the most part, they're broadcasting, or supposed to be broadcasting the same types of information, like the altitude of the drone. In the case of standard remote ID, which would be primarily used for commercial operations, it's going to include the location of the operator, essentially the registration number, license plate number, right, of that drone, or serial number if it's kind of a shielded operation or something along those lines. You're saying your software is going to pull in. And by the way, that remote ID data is supposed to be publicly available. So until now, Jason, no one's been talking about, well, how does the public actually get it? It sounds to me like what you're doing is going to pull in that data so Joe Q Public could actually access it.
That's correct. So we want to be able to have many of the general public homes to be able to access that data, and then funnel all of that data with many more nodes to a database that can be utilized from the government. Additional security for the national airspace, as well as being able to track and improve future metrics about flights, heights, incursions, security. So if you have different areas that are problematic, you have a lot more data when you outfit homes and include the general public as to just having a quote unquote corridor or highway where the drones travel. So much more data is good.
Yeah, so I mean, we've been talking about private homeowners, but clearly when you think about you know, other transportation systems, right? Whether it's a highway or a bridge, you know, infrastructure, things like this, it's usually the state or like local authorities that are going to toll those things, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So um, the primary is going to be the state because they own the most land. They're going to create the regulations based on their individualized state. We're pushing for home and private landowners because, you know, the general public deserves that, in our opinion. But at the end of the day, the state and local municipalities are going to be the largest winners of the lot for sure.
Well, yeah, and you know, Jason, we talked about this in Clubhouse. The fact is that, you know, under the Constitution, the people really have the primary authority in the United States, are supposed to, and then, you know, then the states under the 10th Amendment, and then of course the federal government gets those powers that are not otherwise reserved to the people in the states. Um, you know, I think when we look at airspace and kind of who owns it, right? We've talked about that this and owns, I'm going to do air quotes, right? Because when you think of the term, and in fact, I was going to get my Black's Law dictionary and be a real nerd, put my glasses on and read it. But when you think about this idea of ownership, it's really like the right to exclude others, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's really the bottom line on that. And, you know, having, look, Jason, there are a lot of people out there that would say, hey, we can't have a patchwork of regulations in general, and that's just state by state. Could you imagine if it was house by house? And so what often happens is, you know, the higher level authority, the state will, or, you know, the organization, if it's a federal, like the FAA, for example, they purchase air rights for folks that like reside in the landing and takeoff zones around airports. You know, or they require the companies, right, to do that before they'll approve modifications or additions and things like this to a particular area. So, I mean, this is going to get really interesting. And we talked about, you know, the states and the state of the states right before we got online. And by the way, everybody, for those that don't know, you know, this concept of avigation rights, it's somewhat controversial. A lot of people have their views on it. You know, but one individual who's been writing about it, this guy named Brent Scorup from Georgetown, I think it's is it George Mason University's Mercatus Center. He's been writing about this, and also he just published with a team of folks the 2022 report on kind of the most drone friendly states. And Jason, drum roll please, you'll hear it first here. Tell them who it is.
So number one is Oklahoma.
Yeah. And you know, I was, you know, so they bumped North Dakota off the map, and I was thinking, you know, to number two, not off the map, to number two, off their perch, and that North Dakota had been there for a number of years. And what Score Up in the Mercatus Center score people on is really the drone friendliness of a state, and that includes the legal environment, right? So when you think about who you might be working with, Jason, I would be heading down to Oklahoma, honestly. And as I reflect more on it, I'm wondering if the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, under, you know, the good large part under the leadership of James Grimsley and Brian Post, and of course the chief there, they've been doing amazing things. So maybe it shouldn't be shocking that Oklahoma is now number one. But you know, this idea, and tribal lands are a whole different issue when it comes to kind of legal authorities and rights, which, by the way, is another wrinkle to throw in there. But so how do you, so how would UAS, traffic management, right, UTM, how would this play into your system? So we talked about remote ID and how you've created the technology to now provide that not only to the public, but presumably to law enforcement and other government agencies as well. So that's
Correct.
awesome. how would UTM play into what you've created with Class G?
So I like the ConOps 2.0 UTM and how their system was designed. I followed a lot of work from PK and Joey Rios and NASA Ames research. I followed all of their things. But I think it lacks the additional data points that's going to come from HOAs, homeowners, and state properties. So if you have a strict corridor, it's more of a narrow focus, in my opinion, if you add the general public and more nodes through homeowners and include them, as opposed to just labeling of the general public. So if they can now provide a small piece to a bigger system, so much more data is going to be able to improve the flight data management and tracking all that information for drones. And I think it's going to be well needed.
Yeah, I totally agree. This idea of corridors, again, there's haters, there's lovers of this idea. Score Up himself was the one that proposed, hey, just fly over existing highways. Like states already govern those, or municipalities in the case of a local road. And, people are used to the noise there. And so when you think about that, it kind of makes sense. We had a gentleman, remember Jason, on the clubhouse that was talking about the right-of-ways over railroad tracks.
Yes.
I mean, why not? Like, right? Those railroads are already pretty loud. Those tracks are established. They're all over the country. Does this make sense? Why do we need to be cutting across people's backyards? And when I think about the deliveries that are happening today, and Jason, I'd like you to elaborate on this, correct me if I'm wrong. There's definitely, I think, been some agreements struck with the local homeowners associations. Like, these aren't just happening from Walmart or anywhere beaming into people's backyards. There has to be kind of agreements and conversations for these things to occur.
Yeah, that's right. HOAs and certain groups are, collaborating with drone delivery companies to, create an agreement so that way they don't run into any legality issues. So you're going to have a patchwork of that when we should be, in my opinion, focusing on a larger collaboration effort that's going to involve the states and then individuals as a whole instead of piecing it apart. Because if you start breaking down like this HOA says I can only do this and this one says I can do this, it's going to be really hard to follow and less cohesive for sure.
Yeah, when I think about what you've done as well, I think when the remote ID rule came out, a number of folks in the drone industry expressed concerns about the fact that the public would know the location of the operator, because sadly, we both know, and everybody out there probably knows, too often drone operators get physically attacked. What I love about your product is that it's almost like a license plate reader. Like, you don't have to go find somebody. You can literally shoot a picture and have the evidence right there from your own house or backyard. And I really feel like it adds a layer of safety that people maybe haven't thought about with this remote ID rule, by enabling, the individual person to be able to track that and send it in to the proper authority, if or when needed.
Yeah, and I think that's a valid point, because being able to track the company or who's quote unquote responsible for the operation of the drone, but not actually tracking their physical location themselves, just having a printout of, you own this drone, it has this license plate number, so to speak, this transaction ID based on communications and protocols, is going to be a lot better. And so that's an added layer. That's a good point.
Yeah, it's really interesting with the technology you've created. It's, to me, very similar in a way to, the Ring doorbells that people are installing now, right, at their houses, where nobody really thought about, local law enforcement grabbing that video to prove, right, evidence of a crime that has occurred. But that's happening, and it's been very useful, right? So I guess for if you're a good actor, you probably have nothing to worry about. But if you're one of these 3C people, right, clueless, careless criminal, be aware, because like Class G is going to enable people to, be able to not only track but prove what you're doing. And then I think at the end of the day, just almost like Jason counter drone technology, you know, to be able to protect the skies from those that would do incorrect things or possibly even do us harm, I think helps actually elevate the whole industry. And so I like to posit it that way, because I think, what would you say to people? I guarantee, Jason, there are people out there that would be listening to this and saying, especially if you're, let's just say, mom and pop drone operator, say, hey, you're just going to kill my business. Like, what would you say to that person?
Well, I don't necessarily think that we're going to kill small drone operator businesses. If they're utilizing their specific service, whether it be photography or mapping, they're operating over the bounds of whoever their client is. And so they have that authorization from that person that or company that allows them, through their contracts or whatever they got going on, to take care of that. But that doesn't mean that, in my opinion, so if I'm looking at this square acre that I'm surveying or photographing and I fly out of it, well, you should be constrained to the specific work area that you were designated and held accountable if you trespass or go outside of that area. And so at the moment, there isn't a definitive way to prove aerial trespass. One, because the laws and regulations are always behind technology, and that's just a constant battle. But we need proof to be able to validate, just like when someone comes in your property and your Ring doorbell photographs them, is used by the authorities to prove a crime or trespass. And we do not have that capability from an aerial perspective for the space above your property.
Well, you're getting some great comments here in the chat, Jason. I want to kind of call out. James Standen is with Before You Go. He's saying there is a need for this. When cars were invented, there wasn't stop signs and speed limits. The more safety we can bring will help public opinion and the operations of drones. And, I agree at the end of the day. Chris Wedgeworth is giving us, kind of the clap sign there. And Arlen Denny is saying, another week and another insightful U.S. discussion, interesting comments. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, the more information you can give people, especially information that frankly is publicly available, I think the more you increase public acceptance and also compliance with the rules that are there. So, Jason, we kind of mentioned some of the legal challenges, this idea of kind of who owns the air, right? We're not going to outline all this. By the way, everybody, I didn't give Mike, our producer, this article, but I did write an article for Inside Unmanned Systems magazine called something in the age of federalism or something. Just look up Inside Unmanned Systems magazine, Don Zoldai. I outline the legal challenges here. I think, in fact, I can't multitask, so I apologize for not thinking of that ahead of that, Jason. But besides the legal challenges, what other challenges right now are you facing? Are you still having some technology issues you need to work through to finalize your product? And any other challenges to make this a reality?
So our current major challenges is funding. So we are a bootstrapped company. The patent was issued in May of 2020. We have a couple more in the pipe to be filed in the near future. And I paid for everything myself with friends and family. And so at some point, we're going to look at changing that, but that's the current issue. And I also have a day job, and I work 70 to 90 hours a week doing high voltage electricity. So time management is very important. So funding and time management, 1 and 2 as far as challenges go.
Yeah, I think probably many companies and entrepreneurs share those challenges, Jason. So, but you've come a long way working with Oracle to develop this. where are you in product development? Like we saw the video, the cool dashboard. Like, what's your timeline going forward? Just approximate.
So we have the APIs, the software's coded, sourced. We're working with a few manufacturers on joint ventures, creating the printed circuit boards to get the hardware completed. And then we'll have to interaction mesh the two. And we're hoping to have the operational MVP by the end of the year. So that would be a good start.
So we've got a suggestion for you there to check. Maybe you should go on Shark Tank because they would probably absolutely love this. By the way, Jason, we have incredible people in the audience always, but this guy, he's a heavy hitter in North Dakota, Tom Sawyer Jr. He's with Grand Sky. And he says, this is a fascinating idea. My one question is, how would the system enforce payment from someone that flew over my house? And who is that enforcement authority?
So the enforcement authority is going to be the state because they're going to be the primary recipient of the revenue created by the usage of the airspace. And the individuals will piggyback on that same transaction system. So it's similar in aspects to when you pay tax on gasoline. So you have to build the highways, you have to maintain them, but everyone gets to use them. So it would be the same system trickling down from states to homeowners. That way we don't have many different systems in use, and you can utilize the same one that's effective for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Tom and the North Dakota team, they're doing amazing things out there, as you know. And so now that I'm thinking about it, like Tom would be a great person for you to connect with, Jason. And of course, the Vantas team that's creating that corridor out there for beyond visual line of sight in North Dakota. I don't know, I don't know the exact route and over which properties that will be flying, but it seems to me this system is something like getting in at that state level with one of these top states. I think, boom, will propel what you're trying to do, right? And of course, North Dakota and Oklahoma both are very high up on the list of FAA R&D partners with both the integration pilot program previously and now the Beyond program. So, some heavy hitters in both states would be really great connections for you. So have you already been working with some states, Jason, like in discussions, if you're allowed to say? I know there's a lot of, kind of proprietary information and, non-disclosure agreements and whatnot that might come into play, but we would love to hear maybe, if you're already talking to some of these folks.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of paperwork, more than I care to fill out, but that's just part of the process. We've been working with our local governments because in that published list of states' drone readiness, Kentucky, where I'm currently residing, was near the bottom, and so we plan to change that. But we have been speaking with a couple of different other states that generalized, I can say Ohio, Georgia, North Carolina, Jersey, and a few other ones pending, but that's where we're at the moment.
Well, some great states right there as well. I mean, when I think about Jersey, I think of Ray Adams and Ron Leach from the Urban Low Altitude Transport Association, who were on this podcast in May for as Volatus Above and Beyond series guests for Vertical Flight Month. And, Ohio, I mean, they're doing some great things in technology. Of course, big Air Force location and Air Force Research Lab is there. North Dakota, holy shnikes, right? The AUVSI chapter there, and Darshan, has been working on things there, and Flytrex is delivering things in North Carolina. So, you're talking to some of the right people there. Absolutely. Let me ask you this. Have you engaged at all with public safety organizations or like drone responders or something to get their feedback on what you're trying to achieve?
We haven't taken that route yet. We know that in the future it's going to be coming as far as first responders and LEOs, law enforcement officers. At the current moment, we're trying to get as many regulations established as we can. And we know it's a marathon. This is not, hey, look, we're going to get this done as fast as possible, because sometimes fast is not good. And
Yeah.
so we want the best foundation that we can build going forward, which nothing will be perfect, but if we take into account as many things as we can, collaborate with as many brilliant minds as there are in this space, we're going to be that much better off in the future.
Yeah, so that raises an interesting question, Jason. Is there a way to like segregate, if you will, like the capabilities of your system? In other words, I'm working with another company called Vodix, right? And they have the manage, stream, and fly aspects to their software as a service. You don't have to purchase all three. You can tap into one. So my question is, because let's just hypothetically say remote ID is actually a thing that's going to happen here. I mean, we have a lawsuit pending, right? FAA, race day quads versus FAA, and there's a little bit of uncertainty out there. But let's assume at some point this is going to happen, and absolutely law enforcement needs the technology. It seems to me you've already created it. Okay, so put the tolling aspect aside. Do you think there will be a way for maybe an initial rollout of, hey, this tracking, photograph, evidence collection aspect of what you're doing that law enforcement absolutely will need, and frankly, the public may as well?
I think at some point there's definitely going to go that route. Anytime that you utilize a massive amount of data for multi-purposes, there's always another use case that presents itself. And so at some point that's going to be viable. And then, being able to allow LEOs and first responders to not be told based on their transaction IDs. So like when you go down the road, you see a state trooper license plate, it's going to be the same thing for your aerial trespass, because if they have a fugitive running through 8 backyards, you don't want to say, well, hey, you can't track that fugitive with your drone because this is my airspace, because that's just not a good idea. You'd rather apprehend the fugitive and do what's right.
Right, absolutely. So I could see immediate uses for this. So, and I don't know if you answered this. I started talking again. I apologize. Like, what is your timeline to roll out at least this initial, let's just say, kind of integration, tracking, and photograph evidence collection capability?
We want to get the prototype completed by the end of the year, and early Q1 of 2023, we are going to start working in a few select test beds. And instead of being private with those test beds, I'm debating about just making everything public so everyone can follow along.
Wow, that would be super cool. And check out Scorup's Who's Who on the States list. You might want to tap into some of those. By the way, Tony Drummond is out there. She's with Global Aerial Management Group, and she's commiserating with you as an entrepreneur, Jason, saying that we all share these challenges. Keep going. And so she missed our clubhouse. She said she'll listen to that again on replay, I'm sure. All right, so we're getting, I can't believe we're almost towards the end of our time here. So really great technology, super amount of innovation going into this. You've been active going out, trying to get this word out, not only through the AUVSI event, but what can we expect from you going forward, Jason? Where can people find you, like maybe at a live event next, where they can meet you and talk in person?
We're looking at different live events that we would like to visit. We're not 100% at the moment because my schedule is quite frankly chaos. But we will be posting on LinkedIn which events we plan to attend, and I'm not too hard to find at those events because most people don't have a large beard like this.
Well, especially if you wear the hat. I love the hat. It's a dead giveaway.
I like to. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very good, very good. I love names and like symbolism. Your logo there, what does it like symbolize?
So it's something that I designed by myself, and I've had a lot of people tell me it looks like a TIE fighter, but I like Star Wars and nerd things, so that's okay. But essentially, it was just a beacon that transacts from one direction to another, and it was different, and it's pretty good design. We like it.
Well, I like it too. And TIE fighters, were they the good guys in Star Wars?
No, they were not.
They were the bad guys. Well, that's okay because guess what? You're tracking the TIE fighters. You're tracking the bad guys. So you know what? It still works. I love it. And Chris Wedgeworth apparently has a big beard like yours too. He's a super fan. So he just dropped that in the chat. So big beards unite. Okay, so any big developments, any announcements that we should be looking out for? Like you said, the end of the year. Finishing the prototype for the tracking and photographing aspect of your technology. What else is going on?
So Class G's air traffic tolling system is going to launch under the name Territory with AIR capitalized. So you have your territorial disputes and territory that people owns, but being air derivative, we've changed that slightly. And so that's what we're going to be rolling out by the end of the year with the completion of the prototype, and that will be what we disseminate to the masses.
So I love that. Territory, like TAIR, Tory, for like air and the airspace. And that's a cool name. So do you have like a location exactly where you're going to launch that, or you're still debating because you're talking about maybe making some of this publicly available?
Ultimately, I'd like to do it in my home state, but since they're severely lacking, it more than likely will be in another state that we do the test bed with, and that hasn't quite been nailed down. Can't quite get that cat out of the bag yet.
Gotcha. Well, one thing I will commend to your attention when you talk about states and events, North Dakota puts on this UAS Expo, Summit and Expo every year. It's going to be very first week of October. I hope you can come, you and Anastasia can come out there, because I'm going to be out there with Grand Sky and Tom and True Weather Solutions, Don Bershoff. And this is a crowd that I think you really need to meet. And the energy is spectacular. I went last year and I became a believer, and I'm absolutely going back. So for everybody out there, if you haven't checked it out, you absolutely should. But we are at almost our time, Jason. So I want to give you the last, kind of 30 seconds to give your elevator speech. Before I do, I want to just tell everybody out there, first of all, thank you for being so active in the chat. Thank you for joining us and listening. Absolutely connect with Jason on LinkedIn, through his website, through his email. And tomorrow in Drone Law Connections, we have with us Kevin Price, the CEO of AccuCode. It's a Colorado company that is doing a heck of a lot more than coding. You gotta dial in, and Kevin will be on the podcast next week. So Jason, the floor is yours for the last 30 seconds.
I'm short and to the point kind of person, so I just want to thank everyone for their time. I look forward to working with everyone in the future, and be kind.
There you go. Thank you so much, Jason. Really appreciate you. Thank you, everybody out here. Fly safe. We're out here.